Now, let's start from the beginning, right? You said that you want to play the London system because that's what you have studied. And I like that. I like that you play the London system because it's really solid. But nonetheless, something that you have to know is that you cannot just play automatically. Especially when you're playing a position in which you haven't been before. Like, for example, here. D4, D6. You said that D6 is kind of a weird setup, but you like to play the London system. Therefore, you're going to play the London system and see what happens. That's all right.
Yeah, I was used to the pawn coming all the way up, and so when you did it, I didn't see an immediate reason not to play the bishop out there, but I guess I could have thought about a different direction.
Exactly, but nonetheless, there is now a change on the position, on the dynamics of the position in comparison with what you're accustomed with your London system. Why? Because one of the main ideas of having a bishop on f4 is that as this pawn is on d5, you have a really decent control of this diagonal, right? What's the problem that you're going to have now? That as your bishop is on f4, it does not have a clear objective here in this diagonal, and also it may be the target of threats like e5 in the future. Does that make sense?
Right, so that makes sense, yes.
As I play e5 in the future, your bishop on f4 may be losing a tempo, and that could be something dangerous for you. So, also, in this position, you're playing it too automatically. You're saying, well, I like to play the London system, I'm going to play the London system no matter what. That's okay, you can even go for your system, but nonetheless, you have to notice what's the difference between what you're accustomed to play and what you're playing in this position. Because if you do not do so, then what's going to happen is that you're going to face a totally different position with the same plans. And that's not going to fly, right? It's almost like trying to bake a cake with the different ingredients and with the same plan. It's not necessarily going to fly, right? It might not work. So bishop f4, something that you have to be really careful with here. Because another problem with the London system is that usually it's not so great against Indians' positions. And by Indians' positions, I mean those positions in which the black pieces play knight f6 and they play something like g6, or they play something like simply e6, and they do not define their central position so quickly. Often the London system is a little bit odd against those positions because it is harder to materialize your plans. See how as the pawn is on d6, now you do not have the square to go to e5 with your knight, which is one of the ideas that you have. Also see how as I move my pawn to g6, your bishop on d3, which is the place where you want your bishop to be, is not going to be so useful because now you do not have the sacrifices on h7 which you want to accomplish in certain positions. You do not have the pressure on the pawn on h7 which you want to have. You do not have a clear way to take advantage of the position of the king on the king side when it castles. So see how many differences we have. It's subtle, right? But yeah, maybe we have to slow down a little bit and think about what we are doing here in this position and try to realize what's the difference and what we should try to do. So just a second ago, I was talking with another of the guys, and he played pretty similar. He played bishop f4 in his second move, and to a position which he hadn't seen before. Actually, it was bishop f5. Sorry, he was playing with the black pieces, and I was telling him that whenever you face a position in which you are not too familiar with ideas, or you are not too familiar with the plans, or you haven't seen before, maybe it is a little bit better to stick with the principles. So what do I mean by that? Instead of playing the same things that you have been playing, try to apply the principles of the opening to the position that you're going to face. And hope that the principles by themselves and good comprehension of a strategy is going to lead you, or it's going to lead you towards a good position. What do I mean by that? What's the problem with moving your bishop to f4 in terms of the principles of the opening?
The bishop is no longer, the bishop really no longer belongs there because he doesn't have this diagonal to work with, and it sort of blocks in some of my pawns as well.
All right, that's not necessarily to say about the principles, what you're answering there. It's more about the concrete position that we are playing. But I would say that in terms of the principle, the problem that you have with bishop f4 is that generally you want to develop your knights before your bishops. Do you know why?
I've never heard that advice before, so I don't know why.
Well, the reason why you want to develop your knights before your bishops is because your bishops have many options to which develop, basically. They have many squares to go, whereas a knight have way less squares. What does that even mean? See how, as you have this bishop on c1, you have all of these squares to try to develop the bishop. Maybe without counting d2 and e3 in this situation, because those are kind of odd at the moment, but they could be one possibility in the future, right? So those squares are all the squares to which you can move your bishop. Nonetheless, when you look at your knight, you'll notice that you have only 3 squares to go to, 2 of which are not too active, are kind of weird and are not so good necessarily, and are kind of the exception to the development of the knight, which are knight e2 and knight h3. Why? Because you're not bringing your knight towards the center and you do not have more central control. What does that even mean? That means that your knight, generally speaking, is going to go to f3 unless there is an exception, or unless you want to do something different, but that's kind of odd, right? That's not necessarily what happens all the time. So what I'm saying here is that as you move your knight to f3, you're not restraining the movements of your knight. Why? Because you were going to move your knight to f3 most of the cases anyway. Whereas, if you move your bishop to f4, what you are doing is you are denying your bishop from all of these squares to develop, right? And you are making your position way less flexible. So that's a problem that you're facing here. See how, as you move your bishop to f4, you're saying, well, bishop, you're not going to g5, you're definitely not going to b2, you're not going to a3, you're not going to e3 if I ever move my pawn to e4, you're not moving towards, let's say, d2 if I ever move my pawn to e3 and I need the bishop to go there. Nope, you're going to f4. When it comes to the knight, it is not so problematic, because anyways you did not want to move your knight to h3, and probably you do not want to move your knight to e2. Does that make sense?
Right, yes, that makes sense.
So, moving your knight before your bishop is something a little bit more flexible. Instead of just jumping to the thing that you already know, but which is not necessarily what you want to play against this setup, maybe a better way to proceed would be something like maybe finishing your development with knight f3, so that you do not define your position so quickly and you keep your plans open for the future, right? That's something that could be interesting. Keep your position as flexible as you can, and then try to see how the position develops, how things are unfolding, and try to react to that, or try to work with that. But do not try to be flexible. Try to be flexible all the time. Maybe you have heard the old saying, "Be like water" by Bruce Lee. That's basically what it means. The more flexible you are, the most options you have, and eventually the more chances you have to adapt yourself to the situation that you're facing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, bishop f4, knight f6. See how I'm not defining my position. D6 is a move which can work with many systems. D6, whoops, sorry there. Let me see. Alright, I'm not defining my position. D6 could work with many moves. D6 could work with ideas of playing c5. D6 could work with ideas of simply playing g6. D6 could work with ideas of playing e5 in the future with my knight on d7. D6 is pretty flexible. It's giving squares for my bishop. It's not defining my position yet, right? G6.
Right.
Now this is kind of defining the position, but now I know what I want to play against this bishop on f4. I want to play bishop g7. Eventually take advantage of your bishop on f4 and play something like e5, to which you're going to have to lose a tempo. And probably I'm going to have a really strong central position, and that would be really nice for me. So bishop d3, you played here. See how, one more time, your bishop goes to d3 before your knight. You're denying all of these squares for your bishop. Of course, g3 is not the square that you want to move your bishop to. G2 is not the square where you want your bishop to be, because your bishop is on f4 and it will be trapped, and that's not necessarily going to fly. But you're denying your bishop of all of these squares by saying bishop d3 is a move, instead of just playing knight f3, for example. Or maybe even knight e2 or knight c3, if you will. Those could be interesting ideas. Also, moves like c4 could be nice, and those could be some of the ideas that you could try to incorporate here. Also, another thing that I'm seeing is this move e3. What do you think is wrong with the move e3? Or is not so accurate?
Well,
it's not a mistake, it's just a little bit less accurate, let's say.
It's not aggressive enough.
It's not aggressive enough, right? See how, generally, in the London system, you play e3, but that's against d5. Why do you play e3 against e5? Because the pawn on d5 is controlling the square e4. What does that mean? As the black pieces are not fighting for the square e4, generally something that we try to do in these kind of positions when we're facing a King's Indians defense, which is what this is going to be, something that we try to do is to push e4 instead of just pushing e3, because we'll have more central control. So a move to do so could be just simply to play something like c4 and then follow with knight c3, so that eventually you can push e4. That could be an idea, right? See how also, I am not saying that you should play knight c3 directly, because that's stopping you from playing c4, which is a move that you generally want to play so that you have more control of the center as well. I'm saying maybe c4 and then knight c3 followed by e4, and then you have more control of the center. Could be an idea, right? But see how I'm keeping it flexible, I'm going for the center, and I'm leaving my options open. I'm not just being stuck with one variant that I want to play. That's the whole point of all of these things that I have been talking about, right? So e3 is one more time just trying to bake the cake with the different ingredients one more time in a different fashion here. So g6, bishop d3, bishop d7, knight f3. It's not to say that the position is bad for the white pieces. It's just that it could have been a little bit more flexible, right? So knight f3, castle. And in this position, maybe a move could have been just simply e3. And the reason why I say e4. The reason why I say e4 is because now you should probably try to go for the center. It's losing a tempo, of course, but it's a way to try to go for the center and to fight for the center in this position and not to remain too passively. So that's something that I would recommend you to do as well. Like, try to go for the activity, try to fight for the activity in these kind of positions. You castle, it's okay. It goes with the developmental ideas that you had, that's okay. But nonetheless, see how you could have gone for a little bit more. Especially as you are the white pieces. Why?
Because as the white pieces, I should be more aggressive since I have the first move advantage.
Exactly. That's the perfect answer there. You have the white pieces, why don't you go a little bit more for the point, right? Why don't you go a little bit more with your pieces up and try to kill the other guy? Knight d7, c4, and this was one more time something that was maybe trying to unfold your old repertoire and not thinking about the position. See how you should be careful with this breakthrough here, because your pieces are lined up, and what's going to happen is that eventually there is a fork, and that's losing a piece, right? So after c4, rook e8, you should be thinking about, alright, the guy's want to play e5. What do I do then? So you played rook e1, and you said, well, I can do that too. Literally, that's what you said, like rook e1, yes. Rook e8. Oh, I see that you can do rook e8. And you know what? I can play rook e1 as well. Yay! And that sounded cool, you know, like, oh my god, he can do that too. But what's the difference here? That rook e8 has a purpose, whereas rook e1 does not have an idea behind it, beyond just simply, I can do that too. You know, it reminds me like when you see a kid and he goes like, Mommy, can I do that too? Can I ride the bicycle or something like that? I can do that too, whatever. It's not the way to go about the position, because you are ignoring the whole reality of your situation, right? And you are trying to incorporate one more time something that works for my position, because I have the plan of playing e5 to your position, in which you should be constantly worried about e5. So, I don't know. Out of my mind, right now, a couple of moves come like important variations that you should analyze. One of them is simply e4. Stop me from playing e5, e4. Why? Because if I do so, then you're going to be in trouble. Maybe playing e4. If I play e5, then I do not have this option. You can take here, I take, you can go backwards or whatever, and you're not losing a piece. Your bishop on d3 does not look like the best bishop ever, but the position is about equal, and that's not bad for you. So here, as you played e4, then my chances of generating a lot of trouble are not so big. Another idea that I saw here was to play knight c3. Not only because you're finishing your development, but also because as I play e5, I thought that maybe pawn takes, bishop d5, and in case I play something like this, then my knight is pinned, and there are two defenders on the square e4, so probably you can take here. Because if I take with my rook, you can take with your bishop, and my knight is pinned, so you're winning a pawn, right? Those were the two ideas that I was considering. Nonetheless, afterwards you decided to play simply rook e1, and that's not gonna fly, right? Because after simply e4, the position is falling apart. And this is just kinda over now, I'm just gonna trade some pieces. Nonetheless, in this position, I guess you should have been a little bit more tricky, like try to figure out what's the trickiest way to proceed, because you're down materially, right? So what you want to do now is to try to be as tricky as you can and try to generate a position in which I'm likely to commit a mistake. Even though you're losing, you should be losing, but trying to figure out a way to trick me here. At least at this moment, right? At least at this level. Why? Because there are many people who are going to commit mistakes, and that's something important for us to notice, right? So I think those are the most important insights in this position. Other than that, here you should have seen queen takes d4. That's telling us that maybe you're lacking a little bit of tactics or of puzzles, because queen takes d4 is taking the rook and it's taking the queen. Of course, you do not want to trade pieces. That's something that I like, but you have to be careful with the moves that you're choosing, right? That's important. Queen f5 and queen takes a1, and yeah, this is pretty much done, right? But let's go and play another game. I think this was an interesting one, and nonetheless we could take a lot of things which I believe are important.